and mostly because you and I know the spiritual side of this and what happens to male hierarchy in an all-male unit when you drop one woman into that mix. And it's dangerous. It's ingrained, and I can say it's not you, it's me. Like 30 dudes act like idiots when you drop one chick in, even when or you have to work extra hard in that climate to override it. And because naturally you want to get the door, naturally you want to help them, naturally you don't want them to suffer. It's ingrained in how we are supposed to be as men. And so there's additional resources required when you do that. And if we really are saying we want to win the war, we really are saying it's about beating the enemy, I don't think that you can say women should be there fighting the enemy.
Hello and welcome to the Will Spencer Podcast. This is a weekly interview show where I sit down and talk with authors, thought leaders, and influencers who help us understand our changing world. New episodes release every Friday. My guest this week is Nathan Spearing. Nate is the oldest of 7 homeschooled children and a 13-year U.S. Army Special Operations veteran. He served with distinction as a sniper and assaulter in Special Forces and squad leader in the 75th Ranger Regiment, completing multiple combat deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and other locations. He specialized in counterterrorism, hostage rescue, clandestine operations, and multinational force training. As a senior enlisted advisor, he directly supported U.S. ambassadors, senior Department of Defense officials, and interagency leaders during politically sensitive missions and an active hostage crisis. After 12 combat deployments, Nathan left the military in 2016 to be a more present husband and father to his 5 children. He founded a bespoke general contracting company in Pinehurst, North Carolina. And over the last 3 years, Nathan and his family have built a compound and training facility on more than 50 acres where he trains families and churches to, quote, rescue those who are being taken away to death and hold back those who are stumbling to slaughter. That's Proverbs 24:11. Nate Spearing, welcome to the month-long celebration of 5 years of the Will Spencer Podcast.
Yeah, good to be back, and especially during this monumental time, marking time for you in this as well.
Thank you. It's been an incredible 5 years. There's certainly lots that's happened in my journey, including meeting you. I think we met, was it like late 2021, early 2022, something like that?
I think so. Yep.
And of course, you've been such a blessing to me along the way. And for those who don't know, Nate was the best man at my wedding. And I was just looking at photos of that today. So that was a very special time for us.
That was a awesome weekend, and also reminded me that I am not as young as I used to be.
We didn't go that hard.
We didn't go that hard, but we ended up not sleeping a lot, though.
That's true.
I think my sleep tracker was like, get some sleep, dude.
Mm-hmm. The guys get together went until what, like 3 a.m. or something like that. Was it that?
Yeah, that one. And then I think even after the wedding and you took off, it was like our last night in town, and I think other Nate and I stayed. I don't think we left for Spokane until after midnight or 1 o'clock, and then 2 a.m. and then I think we had to get up at 4:30 to fly back from the West Coast too. So it was like the final push. Slept, pretty much drooled on the airplane window the whole way back.
That's right. Tamara and I left for the send-off and just like forgot about everything. But I guess people kept hanging out at the wedding for quite a bit longer, which was that was really nice to hear.
Yeah, and it's being in that location, there's a lot of cool people. So I shot some texts out, and we're like, hey, the main attraction just took off, starting to slow down a little bit. Started trying to set some other stuff up last minute to keep the party alive. So
nice. So I'm glad to hear that everyone had a good time in our absence as we went off to start our lives together. So you and I were going to talk. I think the original plan was to talk in November, but we rescheduled this week, which turns out to have been a really good thing because I think it was yesterday, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth released a 45-minute talk that he gave. I believe it was to the generals of the combined generals of the armed forces, and that was a barn burner of a speech. I think you sent it to me, and other Nate sent it to me. And wow, what a thing to be looking at from outside the military.
Yeah. I was in the process of getting out of the military. Um, I actually was doing my VA appointments when Trump won the first election, and everybody kind of was messaging me like, "Haha, you're getting out, and it's about to be the glory days." And I was like, "Well, these kinds of things ebb and flow."
Mm.
So and I had a good run, so it'll be all right. And they did ebb and flow, but we're ebbing back in a positive direction from where I sit specifically. And I've briefed um, when the colonel when a full burn colonel becomes a promotable to general. So there's they get upper officer and enlisted kind of have a sequence number because these positions are specific to the rank, and so you can't just keep promoting just like in a job. You can't take if somebody's already in the position. So they have kind of a grooming period where they travel around and are educated. And the part that I get exposed, the part that I was exposed to those rising colonels to general was kind of annoying to me.
Hmm.
It's kind of a uh, it just it the I don't envy their position because the higher up in rank you go, the more removed you are from the ground level. And I guess that was kind of the intent of bringing them through Fort Bragg and talking to different people there, is to kind of give them an exposure of what is happening maybe at the ground level in special operations community and things like that. And but I just remember them like duking it out over some Wall Street Journal article, and they're basically were like it's like a nerd rap battle. And
Hmm.
I was just like, oh my gosh, no wonder like we're in such a state of affairs. Even then, is these there's a little bit of a high buffoon factor there, and I'm judging them harshly because I've always been essentially on the ground. I didn't have to ascend into those upper ranks like some of our friends are having to do that now. So I kind of, was like, yeah, not for me. I'm out. And but but there is just a tremendous top heaviness to our military, and in quantity and also body mass, as the Secretary of War alluded to. And it's a great direction for our military. And I actually wrote a memorandum of somebody connected with Trump's first campaign and kind of was calling for a return to the pre or World War II era ratio of generals to troops. And it's
Hmm.
not unique to me, but a lot of people have highlighted the number of generals that were on active duty, specifically the 4-star, capacity, and that kind of high level general, the number that we have compared to the number of troops on active duty, and that ratio of World War II and the ratio now. And it's just I don't even know it's something like I think 4 or 5 times as many generals ratio by ratio. It's just ridiculously bureaucratic and top heavy. So a lot of people have said like we just need less of them. There's just too many. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many of these. The bureaucracy is thick, but I think that whenever the generals all went to this meeting and everybody was speculating about it, we talked about this I think already. I was not thinking that we were going to war and there was
Yeah.
some nuclear crisis about to happen. I was like, he's going to fire him. But now as a business owner, I realize like it's hard to fire people when there isn't a clear standard that they've violated. In a
Yeah.
lot of ways, that's been nebulous in the military. And so, what this meeting was him essentially laying out a clear standard. And I think that we will see firings happen. We see him uh, laying out the standard that they're going to hold them to. And, kind of my immediate response that I fired out on X was, I want to see the way, 'cause oftentimes these PT tests are administered by soldiers that they command directly. And
Hmm.
so, it's going to be really hard to have a first sergeant or sergeant first class that is, holding the clipboard and doing the measurements to put down a failing score for
Mm.
their boss.
Yeah.
So, I was kind of hoping for him to say, all right, hey, line up, walk out the door. We're doing the PT test now, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and have completely disconnected and trained people, and maybe they did it, and they're not trying to because you don't want to embarrass and compromise, but that's one of those things where if you're trying to really test the standard, we would do those exercises. We come in not really even knowing what was going to happen, and they'd say, grab your kit, move outside, and be prepared for whatever. And then potentially those things go for 36 hours straight of testing of your skills and things like that. So I guess kind of deep down, I was looking for that. It's like, hey, get your PT gear on. We're going to the gym, and having some command sergeant major fit types that aren't going to be pushed around, standing there with the clipboard and line them all up and test them right there, and literally say, hey, I got it. And that's when you fail a PT test. Typically in the military, it's all right. We're going to give you a counseling statement. So we build the paper record. You failed. You didn't meet the standard. You're going to test again in 30 days, or you're going to test again in 60 days, and we need to see. So, that kind of, he talked very much about holding the standard. It's very hard practically. That's where I'm going, is thinking through is how does that practically get worked out. And then there's a dozen. My comment was, I think that these generals will say, well, I'm old and I've been to war and I've jumped, so many times and whatnot. And so I was saying, it's likely not your combat injuries that are preventing you from
Mm-hmm.
passing a PT test. It is likely laziness and inability to take care of yourself. Before I got out, I had noticed that I had a lot more aches and pains, and I wasn't sleeping very well, and things like that. And I had to actually go through. I've talked about that before. I've had to go through a process to realize, like, actually, my behaviors. I'm drinking more than I probably should be. It's inhibiting my sleep. I'm not really getting good rest. My
Yeah.
diet is kind of on the go. I'm doing a lot more office work. I'm not working out as much, and just kind of those basic skills and those basic habits that equal health that you have to work at. And so I really appreciated him saying, if the Secretary of War can get a hard workout in every day, so can you. And that, I think that that's the thing. And then they have staff, they have aides, their aides have aides, so
Yeah.
it's like, get have somebody help you with meal prep and get a workout in, and even just what we've talked about, rucking and things like that, where you can have weight, you can start doing your staff briefs on the move, and
Mm-hmm.
let's create that culture. So I think it's epic to say working out every day, height and weight standards. Also, um, the standard for all combat arms being the male standard
Yep.
and age adjusted too. So that
Yeah.
being, the 18 or 17 to 21-year-old age group is the most difficult PT standard. And then it has a graduated thing. So to say, hey, you're gonna have I think that what it means is that you're gonna have to do that. You don't get to say I'm 40, so I get a buy. You have to still maintain that elite, highest level PT stuff, and so I think that will be really good for for the force. It's just there's just too many excuses, and we need them. We need the excuses gone. And I think he said, if you don't like it, find a new position or move on. So we'll see. I was in the middle of trying to this afternoon, because you sent me those tweets of the people zooming in on the audience. I think that there needs to be a lot more fat shaming of the generals in the audience. I did notice the Marine Corps generals were kind of on the front row,
Yep.
uh, and that was probably by design, because I saw one
Mm-hmm.
of my friends that's a Marine said all the Marine generals were probably like, finally. And I would agree that officer corps is probably uh, more fit than the other services as well. So, but yeah, there's a lot of improvements on the horizon. Hopefully we can keep those types of Secretary of War in position, is this going to be a lot of what I'm hearing is, and we saw this when Charlie Kirk was killed, the active duty military that were celebrating that on their
Yeah.
social media. And I
Mm.
if I saw, 3 or 4, and it is not a general that's doing this. This is going to be a captain or a sergeant first class or somebody that is, but it is indicative of there being, Marxist, stuff ingrained in culture. And I think that we're seeing that, the byproduct of essentially forcing people to comply to, unlawful orders, and those that would actually not comply being forced out, and that's going to have a generational effect on the troops and all the agencies. Even we're seeing it just because put certain people at the top doesn't mean that culturally it just has to trickle down, and it takes a while for that institutional memory. And it's good because you don't want extreme swings. That's why we have a civilian, advisory side to the military. All the services have that. There's a civilian, contractors and civilian positions that maintain some of the continuity, but the downside of that is, this institutional memory and this towards the negative things as well. It's harder to root that out. So either way, I got a big old bag of popcorn, and I'm smiling today, and I'm excited to see how that trickles its way down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was exciting to listen to because I think everyone who heard it has wanted whatever CEO or whatever leader of an organization or church that they're a part of to deliver the same message. Like, standards are now here, and these are the
Hmm.
standards. These are gender neutral, highest male standards. And if
Hmm.
women can't meet those standards, well, tough. It's not that we don't want women here; it's that we want the best warfighters. And the desire that I felt everyone was expressing was like, wow, I wish someone would come do that at my workplace. I wish someone would
Hmm.
come do that at my church or my men's organization or whatever, to say we've lived in an era without standards, or where the
Hmm.
standards have been so low, and a low standard brings down the high standard, right?
Hmm.
But if you raise the bar, some people are going to be cut out and feelings are going to be hurt, and you're going to be called all sorts of names. But ultimately, if you have an organization that's as important as the one that needs to wage war against very serious, fit, and trained global enemies, like the
Hmm.
Chinese army, you know, God forbid we ever actually go to war with China, but they're not shy about showing how fit and ready not only their army, but their society is in many ways. And so
Hmm.
I think it was meant to send a message, not just around the world, but also to America. Standards are here now, and they've been gone for a while, but get used to it. And I found that to be very inspiring.
Yeah, and he also mentioned about, the toxic,
Yeah.
the toxic leadership, and essentially what was considered toxic is considered woke now. And
Hmm.
what the woke was saying, if you are advocating for a standard like this, then you're anti-women. And he did
Right.
a really good job of saying, I'm not anti-women. We have great women serving. I think that from a position of a guy that's been in combat, a guy that, I mean, I've written articles about having the best PT test in my platoon and Ranger Battalion, and having a guy that we had to drag out of on target and try to get evacuated for higher medical treatment, and specifically kind of feeling like, oh, I'm one of the best guys here. My platoon was 2 platoons out on this particular mission, so it's like I'm doing pretty well, and I'm good enough,
Yeah.
and maybe because I'm better than everybody else around me, and then realizing I was not, when I actually had to drag one of my mates out with full combat equipment, and there's a couple of us trying to get him out of the city. You realize the physical, exertion, and I was, at the time, the PT test was push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, and I was on the
Hmm.
extended scale, so max score of 300, and I was routinely in the 320s,
Hmm.
330s. So every rep you get over max is a point, and then I think every 6 seconds under the 13-minute mark or whatever was a point. And so I was running, a minute faster than the max around that, and then getting 10, 15 reps over in push-ups and sit-ups. And so I'm getting this extended score, and there's people that get close to 400 on the
Wow.
test that are just crushing it. So and that's the thing, is I'm exceeding the max standard, and I'm on the battlefield gassed in a combat situation. And so
Hmm.
for me, I intend to do a little bit of discussion about even if a woman can pass at 70%, male aged up to 21, is that still something we should be doing? And mostly because you and I know the spiritual side of this, and
Yeah.
what happens to male hierarchy in an all male unit when you drop one woman into that mix. And it's
Yep.
dangerous. It's ingrained, and I can say it's not you, it's me. Like, uh, uh, 30 dudes act like idiots when you drop one chick in, even when or you have to work extra hard in that climate to override it. And because naturally you want to get the door, naturally you want to help them, naturally you don't want them to suffer. It's ingrained in how we are supposed to be as men. And so there's additional resources required when you do that. And if
Yeah.
we really are saying we want to win the war, we really are saying it's about beating the enemy, I don't think that you can say women should be there fighting the enemy,
That's right.
because it fundamentally compromises the complex algorithm that is an all male unit that is functioning and having to, I think it's Anthony Eslin that talks about, when you have a football lineup and the ability to take a hit and to, be the leader of a particular play, or be sacrificial in a certain thing, and even that much more on the front lines of combat is required. And it's just, I can understand, we had there's a cultural thing that happens in Arab countries with the, men and women, that
Yeah.
is, it is not really good. How, and anybody that is trying to, it's one of the factors of these, woke trans people demonstrating for Palestine, that they would not be getting treated that way if they were in, Saudi Arabia or Iran or any of these Islamic states. But so I can see, you know, using women in a very shrewd way to engage with women in in those cultures potentially. And
Yep.
so those are the ways I've seen it done well. But it's still really hard to do that when you're operating at a forward operating base, and you're sleeping next to the Black Hawk, and you're moving around, and it's tricky. And so I think at least far, far, far fewer numbers than now, and I don't think just passing a 70% male up to 21 age standard is good enough. But at the same time, the Secretary of War is over the Army as it is now, and reform is not going to be overnight.
Yeah.
And he has the force that he has now, and so I think he's doing a really good thing. I mean, it's probably significantly abrasive to roll back the standard to all combat arms, gender neutralized, age adjusted kind of thing. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. So I'm not going to be writing these, I'm not the world is flat. How come we can't go back to everybody being crusaders with on horses, and all the women with their wash buckets or whatever? Like, I'm not saying that, but I am still kind of crying out for that a little bit more, based on personal experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the idea that I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm just going to say it. So
Well, you're going to get in trouble online. No.
I know. I'm just going to say it. Okay, don't do this. Okay, don't do this. But I would like an answer to this, not from you necessarily, but if a woman can serve in combat next to a man, shoulder to shoulder, frontline combat, right? Meaning on our side and presumably on the other side, right? So if women should serve in our military, presumably they should serve in militaries around the world, right? There's no fundamental difference between, the American military and whatever generic bad guy A military. There's women on both sides. So I'm serving side by side, and I'm supposed to shoot a woman from across the battlefield, right? I'm supposed to just kill them like I would kill a man. If she comes running at me with a bayonet or whatever, I should, subdue, kill, destroy. She's the enemy, right? And I should treat her no different from any man. Okay, great, fine. But so if that's the case, then why is domestic violence wrong? Right? Right? And that's because that's the thing. That's what the feminists say. They have used domestic violence. Obviously domestic violence is terrible, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. But if the idea is supposed to be men and women are equal and identical, and that men and women should be in combat side by side and they should be fighting next to each other, feminists have also used domestic violence as the greatest sin that men have ever committed. But if men and women are equal and the same and identical, why is that so bad? Now, obviously, morally, we feel within ourselves that, yeah, this is terrible and it shouldn't be done, because our heart is revolted at the notion of a man using his superior physical strength, testosterone, to harm a woman in that way. But you can't have it as one standard on the battlefield and another standard anywhere else. What's the reason for that to be different? Now, obviously, we all know that it's wrong, but this is just another double standard that lives at the heart of these claims. I don't think men should be harming women on the battlefield or off the battlefield, to be very clear. I think everyone knows that. But these sort of double standards, it's really once you actually put a pin on it, I think it's like, well, we just want this because we want to destroy everything that is, no matter how. And that's been my question about these push for standards.
Yeah. And I think maybe even just a slightly cleaner version of that is, when you don't have the same, at least I don't have the same enjoyment of watching the UFC highlight reels of women punching each other in the face.
Same.
And I would say probably we may be in the minority. Obviously it's selling and people are talking about it, and there's, some weird stuff about that, but definitely if you put there's not women going into the octagon with men ever. And
well,
this
why
is
not?
a combat. Yeah, exactly. And so it would not even be a challenge. And so I guess those would be the things. And you don't have, I guess this is the other thing, is you don't have a minimum standard for the NFL. You have the best play, and there's a reason why you don't have any women in the NFL. And so my thought
they
would
are
be,
trying. They're trying.
And when they do it, even just at the college, the NCAA level, there's just humorous videos of those kinds of things, and then the illustration of the under 16 soccer teams whooping the World Cup team. These
Venus Williams
these realities. They are in all the elite level sports and combat sports and whatever, and it's and then you see the outrage when or you should see more, but you see the cultural outrage when a dude goes and boxes in the Olympics as a as a female, or things like that. And so we know we know the truth, and those that are not being intellectually honest, and yet they're trying to say they have the moral high ground, and they're trying to you just did that one video about that the shaming that they try to do. That's just totally false. And I think that's one of those things that we're in an era now where you can just slough off the shame that they're trying to throw at you, and just feel like, are you kidding me? Like, look at what you have birthed in our society. We're done with this. Like, I can actually legitimately shame the results of your worldview, and who's actually suffering the most? Ukrainian refugees on the train. They're suffering the most because of your ideology. And so when you say I hate women, and I'm a misogynist, I'm a sexist or whatever. No, I that Ukrainian woman would be alive if I was on that train
Hmm.
before God, and there were male sex people of the male sex on that train that so there can be women of both sexes in our society, and that
Of course.
is the other downstream effect of women being in charge and running education, and men cowering to that. And I know you deal a lot of blows to that ideology as well. And I guess it's safe to say that stuff is going away, at least at the institution that fights our wars, and that's really good news.
Yeah, yeah, and it's okay. Let's take your worldview and let's run out the consequences all the way. Let's
Hmm.
turn it up to 11, and if you turn the consequences up to 11, this is the logical consequence. This isn't speculation. This isn't like we're going to come up with some fantastic worst case possible scenario. It's just a logical set of conclusions, just like the logical conclusion of feminism really is transgenderism. If men and women are the same and equal, and like our bodies are what's holding us back, why should you allow your body to hold you back? You could just be whatever you can. Men and women are interchangeable. That's the logical
Hmm.
conclusion. You can see that now, just like you can see the logical conclusion of a lot of LGB stuff is the T stuff and is the plus stuff. And now there are papers coming out about this. So these are the logical conclusions of worldviews, right? Which for some reason is inappropriate to talk about. But I think it's absolutely appropriate to talk about. And it's absolutely appropriate to say, okay, we've had enough of that. We've seen the consequences of that. They've been really bad on all levels, from the level of the individual carving up their own body, the level of American society as a whole being essentially effectively borderless and losing respect. And actually, I'm sure that there are various world nations that are attempting to provoke the United States, or poke through our defenses just to see where we truly are weak. It's like, no, we're going to shake all that off, and now we're going to go back to being something that might be politically, socially, culturally unpopular. But you know what? We're going to do this anyway, and we can slough off the shame in doing that and have a bounded, lawful, and orderly society. And yeah, that'll be really uncomfortable for a minute. And any organization that takes that on, including the Department of War, but after we get through that period of transition, I think it will feel much better. Just like when we as men have a period of being undisciplined, yeah, there's a period of time where we establish discipline and it sucks. But then we get into a rhythm and it tends to get much easier. A nation is no different.
Hmm. Yep. And we've said that it's a particularly sad day when the government agency that is most tied to the physical realities of this world starts to go
Yeah.
woke. And it was in full swing in 2020, 2021, and on. And so having this stark of a course correction is super exciting, and hopefully that we do our part in as men leading our families, and men in the church. I think that if you have a Christian Secretary of War proclaiming this kind of stuff, like, I think it's a very good time to take up the banner in the institution you're in charge of, and to use that, point that to that, as because the military is often consulted for its leadership, and consulted for its techniques and its systems and its hierarchy and its implementation and planning and all these things. So I think it's a good time to say, we should be rolling out the leadership lessons like crazy as we watch this. And, a lot of people, I think, were very anti Hegseth because, he was not a former general officer. He was a lower ranking officer.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's proving to at least be able to send the fire. And then, from everything that I can tell behind the scenes, he's setting those things up to happen. So I want to see men, and that's, I think I'm going to be using that. I copied the transcript of the speech, and I'm working through it, and I'm going to be using that as vignettes for probably at least a week or two, calling men and church leaders and local governments and things like that to follow his example where they are right now.
Say more about calling church leaders to follow that example, because I think, you and I are both part of a conversation that this needs to be in the church. Pete Hegseth is a faithful believer, reformed CREC denomination, attends the DC Moscow church
Mm.
plant. And so bringing this not just into the Department of War, but also into American culture more broadly, but also into the church, I think that's a very important step, but also to do it in the right way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think first and foremost, as young men looking at the problem, we have to. I think it's healthy to think about what the generation before us did well, and focus on a lot of that before we're critical. And then obviously focusing on our own sin. The Bible talks about that, remove the log from your eye before. So I think that there's a tendency for us as younger men to to minimize the size of the log because and I honestly think that with the thought experiment that I ask the listener to do is think back to what you thought, how you thought about the world. I'm 42. So if I think back of how I thought about the world at 32, I
Mm,
honestly think that that guy was a fool. Nate at 32, but I was where I was, and
of
and I
course.
was growing in sanctification. My pastor always beats that we are being saved. It's the not once always. I said a prayer when I was 14,
Yeah.
and I've been spiritually stagnant. No, we should all be on this trajectory. So if you can be humble and honest as you look back at your own sanctification, there is no reason to believe that sanctification doesn't continue and that wisdom doesn't continue at least at that same rate. And if you look back and you're not seeing a lot of difference, I would question about who you're hanging out with, what your actual spiritual disciplines are, and whether or not you're around people that can challenge you and call you up to a higher standard. And, you, first and foremost, you don't need to have a church that does riverboat gambling getaway trips every weekend and smokes cigars and like is just hyper masculine, even though my church is very much just full of hyper masculine men, godly, submissive, quiet, peaceful women, lots of children. And I can look at that and I can be incredibly excited about that. But there is a tremendous capacity to lead yourself with the word of God, with prayer, with working out and all those kinds of things. But I would say that, as I can still consider myself a young man, but I'm a deacon, but I am potentially in the track to be an elder at some point pretty soon. If you look at the ages of the people in leadership now, and we're bringing in younger deacons and we're training them. And what actually happened at our church was I think we brought in a class of 11 deacons. There was like
Mm,
four of us or 10. And so they interviewed, and I don't necessarily think that they maybe thought all of them were going to get approval. So just like, let's do a big class. Let's go through deacon training. And then the elders were sitting with the men, and my pastor, and I think one of the elders even told me, they're like, these guys are awesome, you know,
mm,
and they're 30, 31, 32, like coincidentally that age group that, um, they're crushing it, and the elders sitting with them and interviewing them and training them and getting them ready to take this office of deacon. And they were just basically incredibly surprised, or were just pleasantly surprised of how wise these guys were,
hmm
and I kind of was like, yeah, they're ready. And so I guess that would be the thing that the conversations I sat down with Virgil Hurt, who is in our presbytery and sponsored our church coming into CREC, and was just talking about and he's like, we gotta give these young guys a chance.
hmm
And he's specifically involved in the seminary to train new pastors. And so particularly that's his passion, is identifying younger guys, start training them and building them up and making them ready to be pastors. But then, we had a conversation about giving guys a chance and realizing that you don't really even Hegseth, that's probably a good thing to talk about. He talked about making mistakes, but in earnest after the right things, and I think a lot of these young guys get smacked around or get relegated to like, you're immature, you don't know, because we're not 65, we're not
Yeah.
70. We haven't been through, to use the metaphor of war. We haven't been through the church splits. We haven't been through marriage counseling and these divorces that tragically happen, or these people leaving the church, or slanderous actions happening at these different, and there's a lot of institutional understanding and knowledge that these older guys have. But I think that is what I want to see as we, have this example in Charlie Kirk being, in his early 30s, early 30s,
Yeah.
and boldly proclaiming that. And I think that will be, I guess, the thing that I um, would want, maybe if it's an older church leader that's maybe listening, to say, where are the 30-year-olds, or even just the 26-year-olds, the 25-year-olds in your church that you can give responsibility to, meaningful responsibility, that they may actually screw up. My joke is like, we're going to give you some responsibility. We want you to set up for this month's fellowship meal, which is making sure that there's enough chairs and salt shakers on the table, which,
Yeah.
like, as a 26-year-old man, that is, and I'm like, well, I'm going to show up with my 5 children, and we're going to have them put out salt shakers, because like, that's the level that fellowship meal setup should be delegated down to. And even we had our fellowship meal this last Sunday. There's like tables everywhere, and the deacons got out of their meeting, and I was like, we don't clean these tables up. Our teenagers are going to clean these tables up. And I think that can be the tendency for an older, and I saw this in the military. We're going to give you this detail to build you up and give you this. And you're just like, are you kidding me? I'm going to go pick up brass on the range with like a couple privates. Like, this is this responsibility that's grooming me for more, like, and I think the same kind of things are happening in the church, where young men are like, this is not responsibility. This is not training me up. This is busy work that a couple 13-year-old boys can do. And I'm 27 and I have 5 kids or whatever. Like this, like, and I think the examples would be, I mean, I've seen Michael Foster execute this in empowering a deacon to run his entire conference, and set up stuff like that. And like, that's a big, like, to run the whole conference, the branding, the ticketing, all the setup. So there is salt shakers and table setup involved, but you're actually having so many tasks now that you're having to tap into unique skill sets and manpower and delegate that down and communicate effectively. And these are things I learned in small business that I, more maybe even in the military, is how to try to effectively communicate that standard. And so I guess that's what I want to see in the church. And specifically, he talked about empowering leaders to be able to make mistakes, and then that not to be damning of their entire career. There was this particular moment he said that we're not going to keep these derogatory things in their file forever that are going to prevent them from advancing. And essentially that is scaring people from taking risk and trying to help out, and because they don't want to get this reprimand that's going to flag them. They're not going to get promoted. They're going to get kicked out of the military early. So, those kind of things are in the church too. It's like, hey, like, this guy might actually screw it up. He might say something online that is a little bit difficult to, and I had the discussion with Yuri on my podcast recently, just saying, encourage them to action, and don't micromanage it, and then say, hey, let's sit down in 6 months and let's talk about the trend. Let's talk about the kind of major lessons learned. We talk about the military. We call that an after action review. It's setting aside time after you've done a mission or a training exercise or whatever, to just kind of review what happened, and specifically what didn't go well, and how you can improve those things. And I just think we need that We need young men to be put, but at the same time, we as young men, we cannot be saying, out of the way, boomer, with disrespect. I think there can be some healthy banter between the old guys and the young guys, and there is in our church. It's just beautiful. It's awesome. And I've been around our elders, and I'm making fun of them. And hey, we want you to come to the cigar circle with us. We need some wisdom down there. If you're not hanging out smoking cigars with us, we're gonna go off the deep end, and you don't want that, do you? So
Right.
acknowledging that there's some real wisdom that we need, and then that the way that they're making decisions isn't necessarily because they're clueless and lazy and are scared of feminism, or whatever. Like there's actually some institutional long experience and wisdom there. But at the same time, I think that you got to let us go. You got to let us go take the city. You got to let us take Christ into the dark places, and you got to empower that and encourage us. And that's it's helpful to have an older man say, "Good job," you know.
Yeah.
And my pastor, I'm in charge of security at our church, and I gave a speech and was kind of addressing. It was actually the Sunday prior to Charlie Kirk happening. We had rolled out some security protocols, and so I went up front and I kind of delivered a pretty scathing kind of thing about guarding the church and guarding your family and roles, and we take it seriously, and who's involved in that. And Pastor came up and said, "Good job," you know,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and that means a lot to me to hear my pastor say that. And I put a lot into. I mean, I actually had some bullet points. I ran it by my wife. She helped me make it not as inflammatory and gave me some wisdom, and just putting the work in to go and make a talk like that, realizing the second and third order effects of it, and getting counsel, and then having somebody say, and then even just having actually surprised a lot of women came up and said thank you. And my wife said, yeah, there's a unspoken fear and anxiety in the church when these things are happening, and
Mm.
you became the face of that, and spoke words of strength to that. And I think that I don't know how that is on churches, but I am having a lot of conversation with church leaders about the security side of things, and one of the things that I just learned, not mastermind thinking through, but just when you're giving guidance and letting those in your protection and care know that you take it seriously, there's relief from that. Oh, thank goodness, Nate's taking care of this. Thank goodness other men in our church are thinking about this. Thank goodness they're training. Thank goodness that they're doing these security protocols with our building. And those are the things that younger men can do. This is not the thing maybe that the 21-year-old with one kid is doing, but this is
Yeah.
something definitely that the 28-year-old with 3 or 4 kids and married or whatever, is ready to do. And you have to enlist his help. You have to give him training. You have to give him responsibility. And that's with this the new diaconate that we have. We have all these guys, and we are just making a tremendous amount of progress on dozens of fronts, because there's guys like, I'm primary on that. All right, who's alternate? All right, give us a report next time. And they're just going off and executing at that level. And one of the things I kind of pushed was like, hey, we need to be able to spend money without having to do a everybody vote, And
Yeah.
so, like, let's figure out what the cap is. If it goes over this, then 2 people vote. If it goes over this, it's everybody, and then it goes to the session. And we're not actually asking the session, is this okay? We're drafting the policy, presenting it to them, and then saying, if you don't like it, feel free to shoot holes in it, but this is how we're executing. And that's in a little bit in the forgiveness versus permission, but also still we're going to take bold action in a specific direction, and we're willing to hear it. And I guess that's the other thing I had to learn is I think a lot of guys are looking for that older guy to say, I think that's a good idea. You should try that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's maybe not going to say that. Like, you're maybe like literally it would be nice. It'd be nice if an older dude took 5 or 6 of y'all, the coffee, what are you working on? What are you passionate? Who are you ministering to? How's things with your wife? All those things. But even then, say like if you're getting bold preaching and you're not necessarily getting the discipleship, what do you think you should be doing? And then start doing it. I mean, I launched my podcast. I try to get my elders to listen to it regularly. Most of them are like, "What's a podcast?" Because they're in their 70s, it's funny, but even realizing like, hey, like I might not be getting a weekly debrief from my session about it, but I'm asking them. I'm willing to hear it. I want to submit my online presence to their guidance and wisdom, and even going and asking them to do that. Initially, I knew I needed to, because when it was first recommended to me, I was like, no, I don't want them to. I don't want. It was like, okay, no, that actually probably means I should
Yeah.
submit to that and ask for it. And if it's particularly spicy, I'll bring it in and be like, "What'd you think?" And
Yeah.
and that kind of ebb and flow and that tug of war and those mistakes and confessing our sins to each other, the church is going to advance,
Hmm.
and we're going to make a lot of progress.
You said right there at the end, you said the really important word, which is submit. And I think
Mhm,
that it's very popular in the Christian Reformed or even right wing political dialogue now to be saying that women should submit. But it is much less popular to say that men should also be in submission to their
mhm,
body of elders, to wise leaders, to men of another generation who have acquired a lifetime worth of experience. And
mhm,
submission is uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. Now, no human authority is absolute, and you shouldn't submit in sin. We're commanded
mhm,
not to do that. But if otherwise, if your husband or if your pastor isn't in sin, isn't in doctrinal error, that's part of the Christian life. And so what you've articulated is you have your pastors, you have your elders, you have the deacons, you have the young, you have the older fathers, and then you have the young men, and you have that
mhm,
entire chain of command. And when that functions together well as a hierarchy, everyone is getting what they need. The men
mhm,
downline are giving respect to their seniors upline, and the men up the seniors upline are giving opportunities and approval and guidance and wisdom to the men downline. And that may mean if you're downline, you don't get the green light to do everything that you want to do, but
mhm,
it's incumbent upon the older men to give it. But for the same reason, you as a young man, not you, like the royal you, have to accept that maybe you're not going to get the opportunity, but submission and respect and wait, you will get the opportunity. You will get that opportunity in a healthy, functioning environment. Obviously, leaders can be cowards. Obviously, leaders can be hesitant to make any changes that might disrupt their comfort later in life. Like that's a common thing. But in a
mhm,
healthy, functioning environment, everyone has to recognize, every man has to recognize the needs and responsibilities of everyone else around them, and then it works. And what you're describing to me sounds like something that works imperfectly. Of course, every organization is going to work imperfectly, but when it works well, it creates a feeling of the Christian life that I don't think can be replicated as some guy just out on his own, listening to podcasts or whatever. Nothing wrong with podcasts, but as a man, you're called to be part of an organization, a church organization that's larger than you, that you have to then submit to. And yeah, it's uncomfortable, but that's part of being a man. Like men do
mhm.
hard things, including submit to their elders and to their righteous authorities. We don't see a lot of that being talked about today.
Yeah, and ultimately, a wife is going to be better at submission when she sees you
Mm-hmm.
submitting,
That's right.
and it's more than just I'm going to submit to Christ, which for sure you
Yeah.
need to do. But that's kind of a nebulous thing, in the sense that what does that mean for me today? And what does that mean specifically with this issue with this particular kid? And what really has to happen is we have to bump up against each other
Yeah.
and we have to sin against each other. It's going to happen. It shouldn't, but we should, when we sin and we confess and we go up or when, what will routinely happen is one of our kids will sin against another kid and the dad, we had a dad, uh, you know, he talked to my kid pretty abruptly and roughly,
Yeah.
and I'm standing right there, and
Yeah.
for a second, I was kinda like, no, I'm actually okay with, he was acting kind of fool. My back was to it. I didn't
Yeah.
see it. And he was just, it wasn't like, hey, Nate, can you maybe talk? He just like, called the kid's name.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, well, a little bit rough, but like my son was being this way. And, but then he was like, hey, I got to apologize to your son. I kind of was um, a little bit sharp, for me, I wasn't outside the threshold that I needed to be like, dude, don't talk to my son that way, whatever. I could, like, it's an
Yeah.
opportunity for me to be like, no, like, my son was in the wrong. We're in a body of believers. He saw it happening. He addressed it quickly. It's not something I need to talk to him about. But then he was even like, I need to apologize,
Yeah.
and then so he apologized. So that other side of it is my sons seeing men confess up the chain and down the chain,
Yep.
and in this sense, that's submitting to even somebody lower in the hierarchy, in a sense, to say that I'm submitting to God's law that's bigger than me. I violated that. And just because my position is over you hierarchy wise, I'm going to show submission to God's law by confessing my sin to you. And it doesn't make me a weaker leader. It actually makes me a stronger leader, and it shows that I'm in submission to God's word. And and by my kids being in a church with men like that, they are getting the gospel reinforced by others. It's not just, oh, dad's faith and mom's faith and what do they know, but they're seeing the whole church, and they're seeing families walk that out. And then another side of it is just learning to, like, let people wrong you, and you don't have to go and confront them about everything. Like, there's an
Sure.
opportunity to cover in love and keep moving,
Yep.
and I've talked with people about this. My pastor, even specifically, is like, we are so comfortable in church together. We're not having to pretend. We're not, those of us that are, I think, really getting the full experience. We're not we're acknowledging who we are in Christ. We're acknowledging, and then we're looking at each other, hopefully more and more every day, like Christ looks at us, is sinless because of Christ's blood. And that opportunity to walk that out really tangibly in the day to day, and not let bitterness build up, and have discussions about it, and when there needs to be stuff confronting, we can. But by and large, like, there's not a lot of that happening. There's a lot of confessing happening, and there's a lot of sanctification and taking on our own sin. When you're with a group of people that are all doing that and serious about that, it works.
Mm-hmm.
It works well. And I think that um the tendency can be, when people start to see your faults, uh, and be able to call you out about it, that you need to run, and go find a new church and automatically find some minor doctrinal point that's actually really been a thing all along. Just so happens to coincide with the fact that we just called you out about something sinful you just did.
Yeah.
But now this doctrinal issue is super big, and I got to go to the next church down the road. That's the tendency. And I've seen a lot of people do that in our church. And honestly, I see little blips and little screenshots into their life on social media, or you're about the marriage that is no longer a thing, or whatever. And it's tragic. And that's the conversations that I try to do with the ones that I have, the equities. It's like, hey man, this is generationally significant decision you're making right now, to remove your family from this fellowship and to go to somewhere that doesn't know you as well. Because we love you still. We know who you are. We know your faults, and we love you.
Yeah.
And you're gonna, it's uncomfortable to have people know your faults, and to know who you are, and to be able to see through the veneer maybe that you're trying to throw up certain days or whatever. But I think it's also incredibly comfortable to have somebody come up and be like, you okay, dude? Like, something seems, and just be like, this week was hard,
Yeah.
and tell me about it, Okay, sweet. Can I pray for you for real quick? And send a follow-up text. Hey, I'm just checking in. How's it going? And these kind of things happening organically among men. And it's really hard to have that happen if you're not there. If you're showing up, you're running out the door as soon as the sermon's over. You're not hanging out afterwards and letting your kids sin against each other. It's not good. And I think you have to be comfortable enough in who you are and what decisions you've made, that even when it's challenged, you're like, all right, let's do this. We're about to go, and even just with the stuff on Twitter, like I started challenging these different positions, you can just kind of see the preciousness of these conclusions you come to, and not wanting to actually logically work it out and to react a certain way. And it's like, come on, dude, like I actually agree with you on these things, but these are some things that obviously not talking about. I mean, it happens with the church too, unfortunately, on X. These kind of things are happening between pastors and things like that. And, I have been told that, and I've talked to you about this, is when I'm doing these I'm at U.S. embassies, and we got USAID and all these different political agencies and things, trying to figure out how to work together and build coalitions and things like that. I want to see the church doing that. I want to see, families, which are essentially like little combat units and squads, becoming, platoons of squads and platoons of platoons, and all coming and getting their marching orders from Christ, and getting their marching orders from a guy that's breaking it down for what it looks like at their level, and then executing at their level. And I was thinking about before, as I was listening to Hegseth's thing, it's like, I don't think there's a lot of Marine Corps general poking at Army general over here and making fun of him and saying, like, because he's worried about his troops. He has his area of operation. He has this thing that he's in charge of, and he's got to do adjacent unit coordinations. We're in overseas. There's, even for special operations, we're going to go into these areas that a regular Army unit is kind of in control of. So we're still going to coordinate. Hey, we're doing a hit over here. Do you have any guys in this area? We don't want any friendly fire, like kind of those kind of things. But you're not talking to somebody like when Iraq and Afghanistan are going simultaneously. You're not sharpshooting what is going on in Kabul when you're in Kirkuk in Iraq, like, because the war is raging hot in Kirkuk or in Mosul or these places that you're fighting, and you have your troops and you're engaged. Like you probably don't even know what's going on in Baghdad because you're in the fight. And I just don't, I don't think, the spiritual battle has a different flavor to it for sure. But I think I would really like to see commanders in their area of responsibility focusing on their area of responsibility more, and less on somewhere that's not their area of responsibility. Because in your AO, if you've set your troops up right and you're following the principles of war, you can't concentrate your troops effectively if you're also worried about this other city and this other church and how they're doing it, and like 100%. I think, I mean, I want to see the woke pastors getting ridiculed as much as the next guy. I want to see the church purified. And that's, particularly that proverb of people being led away by death and lies to the slaughter. Like those pastors and woke preachers that are doing that kind of stuff are they need the millstone around their neck, and like, for sure. But maybe that woke pastor in your city's the one you should be dealing with, and you should be going in and confronting that face to face and trying to win people that are walking in the front door to that church, and you don't need to post about it, probably. Like, you probably don't need to videotape it. You probably, but that's hard to do, and in a sense, it's not glorious. It's not, the limelight isn't there. And I want to use media as much as the next guy. I want to leverage that power. I want to embarrass and expose these lies. But, there are people in our city where we live that need the gospel that aren't getting it. and we need them to get it. And everything I worry about making fun of or fighting with a pastor in the next city is resources potentially that are there's definitely profits and people are supposed to do that. But I just finished reading Jim Wilson's Principles of War again. Immediately when Charlie Kirk got killed, I pulled it off the shelf and went to Pursuit. And I am excited because Doug did a Pursuit article a couple days later, and I had already sent the Pursuit chapter to everybody on our men's chat because I was like, I knew it's the time for Pursuit. Militaristically, the church militant needs to be ready to chase down, and the way that Jim Wilson talks about it, that's the hard thing to do because the enemy's kind of falling back to where their food and ammunition and supply depots are, and you're kind of having to go out and chase them down and leave the safety of where you are. And he talked about how there's been very few times where Pursuit has been executed decisively, and they've in a sense you don't necessarily just chase them down. It requires you maneuvering faster and kind of getting behind them and flanking them and hitting them, in a different way than just chasing them down. But that, so I read the Pursuit chapter and I started all the way back at the beginning and I went through the whole thing. And I just think that he talks about that there are generals that don't understand principles and there are privates that do. And I think we have a lot of people that are generals in the church that don't understand principles of war. And we have, and I think we legitimately have young men that understand that we should be pursuing right now. We should be taking ground. We should be going after it. And the people in charge don't understand that principle and are saying, no, we paid our building off and nobody's really leaving. And we don't have anybody wanting to get divorced. And I think we're good, and so that's, I think, probably some of where that older, younger generation is going to say, hey, look, we got it. You ran a great race. You brought us right up to the edge of the promised land. And there's a lot of Philistines that need to be vanquished. And I understand you're old. You're not going to do it. Just give me that sword. All right. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go and handle this. And you got any ideas and anything I should know before I go? Okay. And then, and them saying to us, go with God, go pursue and use the spiritual weapons that we have to free these captives. And I want it to happen. Like, I want it to happen now. And I don't think it's going to be Candace Owens that's at the front of the charge. She's no Joan of Arc at all. And so, I don't think we need Joan of Arc. I think there's actually legitimate men that are ready to go.
Joan of Arc.
And all y'all out there that are thinking you're Joan of Arc or you're Dinah or you're Esther, just be quiet and let the men handle it. All right? I'm sorry. I agree. You're so loud. The men that are trying to do this can't handle it. We're ready. Just be quiet. I don't want to have to fight you on my way to slay these orcs in Mordor. I'm ready to go.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because, I was on a podcast yesterday. I think it was yesterday. I was a guest and the interview was about, sort of this rebirth of masculinity sort of broadly. And, at the end, I wanted to tack on, the podcast was ending, but I felt that I needed to tack on something to what I had said. The interviewer was a woman. And I felt the need to tack on to her say like, yeah, yes, amen and hallelujah, men need to step up. And there's no shortage of people who are saying that. But what it also means is that women need to step back because men will not compete at full speed with women. We just don't. Because when you see a man compete at full speed with women, it's not even close. And we talked about this earlier. You can, whether you want to watch the high school boys or the middle school boys beating the U.S. women's soccer team, or you want to hear about, I think it was Serena Williams, who was like, yeah, if I had to compete in the men's tour, I'd be ranked 150th or something like that. She got in a lot of trouble for saying that. She got in a lot of trouble
Mhm.
for saying that. Or you can see I think it's the Chilean men's SWAT team and the women's SWAT team doing some physical training activity. That was a competition. And just watching
Mhm.
the women, it was just embarrassing. So men don't
Yeah.
compete at
I'm
full
pretty sure
speed.
I've clipped that, and it's just it's like cue clown music, and it's
Yeah.
not your fault, you know?
No. No, it's
Like,
not.
and the thing is, it's like, if I just because I jump into if they're in the octagon and I jump in and I decimate this woman, nobody's praising me for that.
No.
I
No.
don't, and that's the thing.
Nor
I
should
don't
they.
wanna have to fight you for this, You're in the spot, like, I understand that the and ultimately, I'm all the time Googling, first name, last name, women, influencer, husband. And I'm never surprised. I'm never surprised at what that Joker looks like,
Yeah.
honestly. I'm like,
Yeah.
that makes sense, you know, like he is, and men, actually, lazy men are okay with that. Like,
Of course.
go ahead and make some money for me so that I can game and whatever you're doing. Like, there is this like sliver of stay at home husband. Uh, I got a sweet gig, my wife, she's a doctor and she can make way more than me. And I understand how it happens in certain
Of
situations. And,
course.
like, I'm not on this podcast to smear those particular situations, but I, um, I, I want, that there are obviously exceptions, but the norm should be going out there and providing and getting after it and not being lazy. But again, like I said, it's I don't want to have to duke it out with, and it happens. It
I don't
happens
want
all
to
the time
compete
on
with
social.
you.
Yeah. Well, and my answer has been lately, if a woman gets a little bit sassy in the comments, I just say, hey, ask your husband. You know, like, I'm
Sure.
sorry, like, I'm not, we're not going to duke it out here. And it's just, I, I'm not going to have an emotional argument right now, like,
Right.
in the comment section. I'm not going to do it. Like, I, I got, uh, I got things to do. Um, and I think that's, I want to see Christians, being more lethal in the war of ideas around social media. And I can't, a guy with, almost 12,000 Twitter followers is not going to be the guy that's like, I've figured social media out. But I do think that there is a lot of principles of war in media that need to be understood too. And I know I'm reading Rules for Reformers again,
Mhm.
right now. And I know, way that Doug talks about who should be doing satire, and specifically calling those that do satire to be the most in submission, the most in
Mhm.
fellowship with people, because the tendency can be to fly off and go off the deep end when you start engaging in some of these realms. And so you need the community even more, and you need the all of it, so it's we're going to learn and we're going to get better. And I think that, Yuri actually said on my podcast, he said he encourages everybody to be on social media, except for the people that are particularly affected by emotionally by seeing what is out there. Cause he's like, there's actually a certain type that it just really messes them up to see
Mhm.
what's happening, and it makes them anxious. And so there's a good sized population. He's like, I think that's just, you're not able to handle what's there. But for the mass majority of people, like, and he said, come up with a plan, start. And he's like, I don't want to moderate your tweets, like, but let's meet in 6 months after you start. And he encourages, like, hey, just get on and post Bible verses for the first 30 days,
Mhm.
and you can get in a lot of trouble doing that. You
Mhm.
pick the right
Yeah.
Bible verses and you don't qualify them at all, like, just the word of God. I think that if we had, 100,000 Christians just posting, uh, you know, baking sourdough and a line from Proverbs 31, and
Mhm.
just simple, beautiful photography, a little bit of, learning how to use the camera, a little bit of editing maybe, and then some scripture, and just blew like just like percentage wise more word of God just going out with some beauty attached to it that's unique to you. That's how we start. And then, I think that becomes a squad and a platoon, and I know there are other religions doing this. The Mormons crush
Yeah.
this game.
Yeah.
They have this. I don't know. I haven't seen it for sure. I've observed it happen where a guy with hundreds of thousands of followers takes a guy with 1,300 followers and gets him to 20 or 30,000 in like 2 weeks. By just
Mhm.
doing a couple posts, and we need to be doing that, but we're too busy fighting about baptism to do that. Like we need to be encouraging each other, building each other up, having these discussions offline, and uniting in a coalition in the same direction. Because I would hope that something like transgenderism or the assassination of Charlie Kirk or these major things could galvanize us into these coalitions that just lock shields together and just mow over the opposition spiritually and intellectually, and then just the capacity to generate like one of the reasons I think that the left is so mad about Charlie Kirk is like, who doesn't look at that family photo and see the beauty of that family unit,
Yeah.
like it's the whole thing. It's smiling husband, beautiful wife, joyful children. It's literally the nuclear family as God intended it, taking dominion for his glory. And you can't, you can't compete with the aesthetic of that, the way that they're I mean, look at their women. They are unhappy, ugly,
They're trying to be men.
overweight.
They're trying to be
Yeah,
men.
yeah. They're singing masculine tunes, and they're it's not right. And we can whoop their butts if we just got together, formed a squad and figured out, that Jim talks about the decisive point, ground that we can gain, that we can take decisively, that will actually move the needle. Something that we don't know we can take it for sure. It's ambitious. It's going to require us to train. It's going to require us to plan. It's going to require us to have surprise and execute well. But we do those sequentially, and we combine those with other decisive points of other believers around the world, and we just start strategically taking them down. And there's people that do that in our circles really well, and they still miss. They still mess stuff up. They still step in they put their foot in their mouth in certain, because they're human beings,
Right.
and there's not grace there for that. There's not it is there. It is there. I don't want to overgeneralize what's happening, but I say all the time, to people in person, I'm like, no wonder we're getting our butts kicked when I see
Right.
certain stuff happen. No wonder, like
Mm-hmm.
this is why we can't unite. We can't figure out the decisive point. And again, you have to have, as a soldier, you have to have mastered the basic individual soldier tasks. And those individual tasks get combined in a fire team of 3 other guys. And you got a saw gunner, and you got a grenadier, and you got a rifleman, you got a team leader who's got a ranger tab and has been in for 2.5 years. And he's the guy that's telling you flank right or flank left. You're all doing PT together, and you're fusing all these skills together, and you're engaging in warfare. And so we need to be identifying what those things are. And we are. I mean, it's happening. Like, these are the things that a man, as or in our house, as homeschooling, these are the things you need to be able to do before you leave our house.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that you need to, the actual tasks you have to be capable of and competent in. And the number one person to instruct you that is your mother, or this particular task, your father. And you need to be listening when we're talking to you about this. We don't care what you know. We're telling you what you don't know, and this is going to improve. And so, and that is happening. But I think that probably where it's breaking down as family to family and church to church, and locally, there's opportunities with other churches, I think, to just really unite and take some ground. Like,
Hmm.
let's go, you know.
Hmm. I appreciate that you mentioned the emotionalism, and I want to make sure I want to get to this. I want to make sure that we have time to do it. But I think one of the things that's dividing our particular camp so heavily right now is not necessarily emotional women, but emotional men who responded to the Charlie Kirk assassination not with humility but rage. That they surrendered
Hmm.
to their flesh, they surrendered to their anger, that which was barely covered to begin with, and now it's just kind of out there. And that's men's emotions. Like there's a time and place for anger, there's a time and place for sadness and grief and even despair. These are part of the natural human experience, but we're called to overcome them in Christ. Except for men don't seem to think that their anger is something that needs to be overcome, that needs to itself be
Hmm.
put into submission. And one of the things that I've seen around the assassination of Charlie Kirk is emotionalism that's expressing itself in the form of, well, there's something larger going on behind the scenes than what actually happened. Like it can't
Hmm.
just be as simple as one, transgender ex-Mormon furry shooter on a rooftop. It's got to be some larger conspiracy, whether you involve Israel or whatever is usually seems to be the place that it's going. And that is a surrender to their own anger, trying to validate in their own worldview the enemy that must be behind it all. And I've done a lot of work on that enemy that's behind it all, but particularly, and we don't need to talk about that here, but particularly talking about the scenario of the shooting itself. And so you with your
Hmm.
special forces experience, you with your ballistics experience, you on the battlefield, treating wounds, delivering them, you have
Hmm.
a particular perspective into this event. Now, I don't have a problem with people asking questions. Of course, ask questions. Completely fine, but you have to be prepared to accept the answers. And I think some
Hmm.
men's emotionalism is leading them to a place where they're unwilling to accept the answers, to submit to reality, to submit to righteous authority that's trying to tell them, no, this is exactly what happened. And I'm sorry it contradicts your worldview, but this is how it went. And so I know that you mentioned earlier that you had been in an exchange with someone on Twitter, sort of a back and forth with their perspective on the shooting, and you went and did some research yourself. Do we have time to get into that right now? Because I would love to hear
Yeah.
your perspective if we do.
Yeah. I think even before saying that, like, you know, Christian men, and then, people that aren't submitting to Christ. And I guess it would
Hmm.
say too is how are you, how am I supposed to be confident that you are submitting to Christ when you're acting like a bitch online and elsewhere? I'm sorry. Like,
Let's go.
pastor, forgive me, but like you are not displaying the emotional regulation that a man should have. You are not displaying a quiet confidence in your abilities, because that's essentially what this is if deep down as a man, you know that you're a sinner, and that it doesn't matter what you did, Christ paid for it. You're anything that you are able to achieve in this life are going to be minor scraps. And if we don't have an example in Charlie Kirk, like very few people in the history of the world will have the impact he did. And he is still just a small piece in this cosmos, in this larger game of what God is knitting together.
That's right.
And I believe the government is grossly incompetent. And I served in the highest levels of Army Special Operations, and things happened that would blow your mind. And it's the most elite. And it can come back to just poor radio calls, poor understanding of where other people are on the battlefield, and even just coming away. Like, sometimes tragic things happens, and sometimes, like, we narrowly avoided tragedy, and we're like, whew, like, we it could have gone so much worse, and we actually would have deserved it to go that much worse. and it didn't. Praise, for me personally as a Christian, praise the Lord, I'm still alive, whatever. And so taking that knowledge of Army Special Operations and then moving that to the post-Biden Justice Department, post-Biden Bureau of Investigation, like just appointing a new director and a new deputy and sending out a couple memos and being at the helm for 8 months doesn't roll back the kind of like institutional erosion and complete destruction of the rule of law that happened prior to this. And all the people that got appointed are flawed human beings that are coming with different worldviews and different experiences. And so, but they're still being put in charge of this agency that has all these people that were, the week prior, the people Biden's administration was promoting, or the people that were controlling the auto pen, if you will. So like, I think it's okay and it's perfectly acceptable to look at the situation and say, we got a long way to go. Just like we said at the beginning of this podcast, we got a long way to go institutionally, government, and we as citizens, it's okay to demand that. It's okay to say, Romans 13 requires you to bear the sword against evildoers to protect me and my family. And I can demand that, righteously demand that from my leaders. It's okay. And I need to be very loud and vocal about it. But how the noise it's going to get mixed and it's going to get muddled if I am throwing in a bunch of tinfoil hat stuff that is speculation. We have to be careful about the more intellectually honest and rigorous we are with our communication in this way. Like there are people that one of the exchange that was had on Twitter with me, the guy said, "You haven't given me specific examples." And I typed like a quick response, and it's like, yes, because it was a friend of mine that got shot in, he basically talks about how in, 6 inches of flesh, and if it was a 30-06, it would definitely go out the back and this and that. And it's like, the ballistic comparison between a 30-06 and an AK-47 that shot my buddy in the leg, but the bullet didn't come out, and I saw the entry wound, and it clipped the femoral head and the hip, and so, I don't have to give this guy a full blow by blow of everything I've seen for what I've seen to actually have happened. And I think that, we start to get in this position because we have so much information that we have all of it in front of us and we get to make the call. There's so many people that are getting on X, and you see it happen right away. One of the things I said about this guy is like, I appreciate you post this video, 12, 14 days after you did a lot. And I appreciate guys like this because he went through a ton of information and edited it and did it in a very methodical way that I don't have to now go do that. I get to start with his 1 hour that probably took him a week. He's probably been doing it continuously since Charlie Kirk, and he's actually gotten videotape that wasn't publicly available from people that were there. He's freeze framed. Wow. He's done audio analysis and he's done the same with Butler, Pennsylvania. So this guy's a smart guy. And that's even what I said. Like I said, hey, I watched the old video. I'm not convinced, blah, 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 blah. And he responded and he didn't ask like, well, what did you disagree with me on? And let's talk about it. And I said, yes, I'd be happy to come on and talk with you. And I got it. Like, this is Twitter. You don't have any idea who I am. You don't know that I was a special forces sniper. And I've done tons of, I haven't done overseas sniper missions, full disclosure, but I've trained, I think it was about 1.5 years. I was in a sniper role. And so my entire life was training, in long distance engagement, short stuff like, subsonic rounds, large, range rounds. I've gone on, traveled around the US to different facilities. And so but I also said, I'm not a gun nerd. Like, I couldn't tell you right now the grain size bullet, the grain, the powder. I understand that because I've had to do ballistic calculations. And then also I have a network of guys that I can call up. So when I watched this video, I called him. I called my friend and say, what do you think about this? And he just basically was like, hey, I've seen 2 to 3,000, either CAT scans of or actually personally worked on guys. And when a bullet enters the human body, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And like, there is so much going on with muscle and vasculature and fascia and bone that it doesn't make sense what a bullet does sometimes. So that little, that's a pretty significant testimony by a guy that's still in and is not going to be talking online about it, that has been in, the war on terrorism for 20 plus years and still actively working. And he's saying, I don't buy, it'll go through every time. I don't care how many ballistic gel stuff that you show me. I don't care how many times you say, look, this is what it did to a deer hide. It wasn't Charlie Kirk's neck. Like, it wasn't the actual bullet that killed him. And so what the guy basically concludes is it's not you've seen there's explosive bullets. It's a weapon in the crowd. It's closer. And I believe he kind of conclusively says, look, it's a high velocity round that hits him in the neck. And he breaks down the angles. And this is a good time to jump over. I can share.
Bring it up.
This is a program called SketchUp that I use for construction. So it actually has a capacity to import so I imported Utah Valley. I was able to put a box on the terrain, and I was actually able to import all these buildings directly from Google Earth. And what wasn't there was, if you can kind of see, like, the buildings were laying flat on the terrain. So I actually didn't modify these buildings here. But I went ahead, and you can see in Google, you can see from my construction background, you can see in Google Earth, you can see these steps. So essentially I'm able to say, based on building code, what the height of this platform is based on the number of steps. And so I did that as basically, I drew this as like that upper platform. And essentially that's the baseline, if you look at it, where all these buildings are. And this building is like 16'4", and there's a stairwell in the Google Earth right here too, that I was able to count the steps. And so this building that I imported from Google Earth was plus or minus a couple inches from what I got based on these stairs.
Okay.
So just in a few minutes, I was able to basically, so even though it's not on Google Earth, it's to scale. So I figured out what the level of the sidewalk was here. I moved all the buildings in the compound up to that level based on the steps from where Charlie was sitting. And then I went and looking at the imagery, there's bricks, 4-inch bricks, and it really looks like the upper levels that we see at Utah Valley are about the same. So I just kind of extruded those, and essentially this is where the shooter was shooting from, the outcropping. So I basically used what Google had, and then I just basically added identical floors. So there is a possibility that there is some discrepancies, but looking at the imagery, and you can take Google Earth and kind of drop there's some people that have done some 3D. You can kind of look and say, look, these levels kind of all are about the same. This is at the level that I can, basically using a little construction knowledge and figuring out the actual height. And what I found out was, I drew this triangle, which is the trajectory of kind of where they say the shooter's position was.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought it all the way down to skeleton here sitting that has the anatomy of the neck. And essentially where I feel breaks down, they say the conclusion was, hey, from the guy was, hey, it hit to the side of his neck, and it clipped these bones. And he's actually really anatomically gifted too, to talk about, the different parts of the bone in the neck, but he's basically saying, hey, if anything, it entered here and it only clipped a little bit. There's no way that this little bit of bone here stopped it. It should be a massive exit wound. And essentially they're saying, hey, it couldn't have been from this position. Because if it was from this position, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping around here a little bit, but let me get back over here. If it was from this position, then it would have gone right through his neck and it wouldn't have stayed in his body. There would have been a massive exit wound. There would have been a small entry wound kind of thing. What I'm basically was trying to say is, look, I agree. These angles, he did the distance. My distance was just slightly farther than what he came down to. Is a little bit bigger. I used a protractor. It's like 9 degrees. He said 9 degrees. I got like 10.1 and 10 point something for the downslope. So he's basically was saying, hey, there's some guys in the crowd that are right here that started pointing this way. And he's trying to say, hey, it probably should have come from this angle, because this angle would have been more straight on into the neck and would have hit more of the bone that would have stopped it. So that's his whole thing, is it couldn't have come from right here. The guys in the audience pointed this way. 2 guys. This angle is steeper and a sharper angle, and that's probably a second shooter. And he's doing that because there's a little bit of messed up audio, and they're thinking that it's not matching up. And last time I talked, he said that he thinks that it doesn't match up like it did in Butler, and he's sketchy about that. And basically what I'm just trying to say is like, it's what you're arguing is such a marginal difference angle wise than that, that what actually, when anybody that knows when they shoot, like the angle that it enters the neck, even just if he placed the entry wound slightly wrong on the neck, even it could have hit the spinal column and stayed in his body. Sure. And I guess I'm just saying, like, you're saying definitively, because he didn't get an exit wound, that it had to be a steeper angle from the trajectory into his neck. And you're also saying that it had to be steeper, but I actually am not getting that much steeper of an angle from this spot over here as this, because it's literally just kind of the same angle out. But it is a steeper shot to the center of the neck. And I'm just trying to say is like, hey, it could be that it entered just slightly more around the circumference of his neck. It didn't enter over here. It could have entered a little bit farther. I don't know that the definitive placement. And that's very likely when somebody's shooting, having a 1 inch deviation to the left or right is very easily caused, at that distance, just the most subtle movement. And then they're saying, hey, guys pointed over here, but we also, the video, we know that Tyler Robinson at least ran over, my computer's lagging here. He ran over, there's like I haven't rendered this, and then he jumped down off the building. And I just am kind of like, well, maybe he was already running like this a little bit, and the people were they could see him running. And so they're pointing after he took the shot, he ran. And then they also mentioned something about the shadow going away, and that they thought that the footage was doctored. But, and I haven't gone out and done this, but it's a white TPO roof, or an EPDM roof, that is just really like reflects and is bright with the sun. And they're like, hey, the shadow went away as soon as he went, and white should reflect the shadow should be more visible on white. But I plan on trying to run out, if I can, to one of our projects that has that really white roof. But one of the things that happens when the sun is hitting that white roof is actually reflecting the light a lot, and you can get sunburn and stuff from standing on it more, because it's like being at the beach or something. And I kind of that's just theory. I haven't gone out and proved it, but they're basically like, as soon as he went right over the white part, his shadow went away. And I'm like, it could be as simple as just like the sun reflecting, and it's, the light coming off of this really hyper reflective white roof. And so I guess when they do a lot of thorough analysis, but then make like what I think is like literally a simple thing of like, maybe it just entered his neck. And even if it did not enter his neck farther around, it could easily have done something crazy, because you're not saying he got shot from the back. You're not saying he got, like, your analysis is literally just, I mean, I want to see if I can get the protractor out here and say, he's literally saying, what I want this degree measurement difference is from here to there. He's saying just another 10 degrees or 11.7 degree difference. And so I guess I'm just kind of like, when the jump is second shooter 11 degrees different, and there's no way this angle would have come out. And so basically you're denying that when a bullet enters a human body, it does crazy things, which I know for a fact it does crazy things. And I have a friend that has a lot more experience that says it does crazy things. So I'm willing to accept that he may have gotten shot from here and it just did some weird stuff because bullets do that. Than to say there's a second shooter. And it's very possible that, that there are nefarious actors involved. It's very possible that the government is not being as truthful about it. But at the same time, why does the FBI have to tell all of us what's going on in the investigation right now? Like,
Right.
what makes, I mean, I can understand, hey, we don't have trust in the institution. You need to be more transparent if you're wanting to get this. But at the same time, maybe Kash Patel's like, screw you. I'm prosecuting this with everybody I got, and I'm going to roll it all out when we got it, And so, I distrust the government. What happened with COVID and what they did is reprehensible. And a lot of those people are still in DOD, still in DOJ, still in the FBI, and they're flying below the radar. Some of them have gotten washed out, but those same people that would sell their friend down the river are still in key positions. I'm not, like I said, I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying, like, it's not as, I'm not getting Israel. There was a Mossad agent, 11-degree difference. And that's the only way that this could have happened. I'm just like, it could still have gotten from this angle. It could have done something weird when it entered the body, a little bit different placement on the neck, and it still could be that guy. And I don't know, like, I only know, I also like to think that I got this one video sent to me from a friend. It was really well done. I was able to spend about 2.5 hours total. I got on some pretty crazy Twitter spaces and listened to some, it's also pretty funny for me to listen to some military guys give their pedigree and why they should be on this space and saying these things. And I'm like, I don't know if you're as amazing. You kind of sound, you're trying to sound like Jason Bourne. I guess I can detect a lot of subtle, humble, or not so humble overstatements of people's capabilities. And I'm not getting that for like this. That's one of the reasons why I really like this guy is I was trying to pull his name up because I think he's not off the deep end. He's very straightforward approach to it. The best video I've seen on it. It allowed me to not go down the rabbit hole with a bunch of idiots. It was empirical, and I just kind of feel like at the last 10 to 20% of his analysis it's based on ballistic gel, and it not a real human body. It's based on deer, not and it's just, I will accept that it's very much in the realm of the possible that it entered the neck and stayed in the body, hit the spinal column, did some weird stuff. And but there's a lot of other things that could be true too.
I appreciate all that, and I've sort of three things to say in response. First is that I haven't talked about this publicly. Gun violence has touched my family as well, and so I
Hmm.
am aware that from an autopsy report that a bullet can do strange things when it enters the body. So
Hmm.
I'll leave it there. Perhaps someday I'll say more about that, but I know firsthand that yeah, that's just true, and people probably wouldn't believe me. The second
Yep.
thing is there's a way in which the conspiracy mindset has begun with the conclusion that whatever the government is telling us cannot possibly be true.
Yeah.
And that's a flawed conclusion. You can doubt the capability, the integrity, and the truthfulness of the government. You are and perhaps encouraged to do that. But if you
Hmm.
begin with the conclusion in mind that, well, this definitely can't be true, then you're just going to seek out information that proves your point, which is not exactly how you do research. And the
Hmm.
third thing, and I'm not saying that either of these apply to the man that you're speaking about, whose name I don't recall either. But the third part is that what I've seen largely since the assassination itself is a consistent attempt to tie it to Israel. No one else. No one saying it was
Hmm.
Qatar or China or whatever. It's like it must be Israel. And we're going to pull up all this information about potential conflict and heated meetings and resentment and all these things that has turned out to be so much fluff that it isn't actually there. So the last two, that there's a pre-assumed conclusion that what the government is saying cannot be true, right? And
Hmm.
so the third part is and therefore it must be Israel. That's the problem that I'm seeing,
Well,
right?
and this guy, Chris Martinson is his name,
Mm,
and I think Peak Prosperity is his like organization. But he said anytime that there is a bunch of stuff coming into the web that is trying to kind of discredit and make counter arguments and things like that, you got to be suspect. And I'm also kind of like,
fair.
or the most significant political, religious assassination in our lifetime just happened at the same time internet freedom has been like Elon Musk has taken the shackles off.
Mm-hmm.
So could it be that? Could it be a ton of users with a lot of emotion and a lot of a mixed bag of experiences just flooding that more than like, no, there's a bunch of, whatever I can't remember the Israeli unit that's like
Mossad.
the hackers.
Oh yeah, I
No, it's
know.
a different one. They do a lot of venture capital stuff and all that, but it's got to be a basement full of those guys doing these complex. Are they doing that? Yes. Are there state actors online trying to swing elections, trying to influence? 100%. But again, when you said like we're gonna start by diving into the deep end and then trying to swim back towards land. That kind of person generally, I think that you can start on land and kind of methodically and be like, oof, like we're way out in the ocean now. How do we get here? And I guess that's more the approach that I'm a little bit less. I mean, people have said we got to get you more conspiracy, whatever. What's going to have to happen? I'm just like, I guess I've just seen how incompetent the government can be, even in elite military units. Before I'm like, they pulled this thing off without anybody knowing, I mean, and that's like the moon landing kind of thing. Like, how does that, if it really didn't happen, how does that stay a secret with how many people had to pull the fake one off?
Sure.
Like that doesn't saying that's not possible. I'm not saying, but like people talk, people make mistakes, people slip up, and God actually likes to have when people mean things like the COVID thing for bad. He likes flipping the table, and he likes bringing about essentially like this. Even what's happening with the revival around Charlie Kirk, the seeds of that
Well,
were sown in nefarious actors trying to control the population with vaccines. And what is God doing? God's saying, the sign. Want to hear God laugh? Tell him your plans. I think that we see that the nations rage, they plot in vain. The Lord in heaven laughs. And I
hmm
think that we as Christians can laugh. Like, my God is spinning all of this, even if it is a nefarious state actor. And what I actually probably need to go do is love my kids and my wife and build my business and create wealth and disciple a couple young men in my circles to not go off the deep end with Israel and all this kind of stuff. Not to say that there isn't, like, there's stuff that is like there. It's sin, though. It's
Right.
sin. It's the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, money, power, and I'm sorry, but full red-blooded Americans are just as, with no affiliation to Israel, are just as bad actors in the system. And the problem is sin. The problem is that we, apart from God, and the whole narrative of Scripture is even people that know God and have His commandments still end up having sex with their dad, and still end up doing these kinds of
Yeah.
things. It's like it's it's crazy, and
Yeah.
and people look at Scripture and be like, look at all these sinners, I'm like, yes, and yet God still subjected His Son to that for us, and
Hmm.
and then how now should we then live, you know? So what if it was a second shooter? Like, and that's the thing too, is like there's this culture of I watched the video where it was graphic one time,
Yeah.
and that's it. And I have seen hundreds of dead bodies and had to actually handle them and do all this kind of stuff. The sanctity of life matters to me. We have a gore hungry and sick population. We have a
Yes, we do.
drama hungry and sick population, and that all was amplified with this event. And but at the same time, we're seeing how the enemy responded, and it's despicable. We're seeing how what Christians are not willing to mention the epic work of this guy. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. I get to see your true colors, and praise the Lord. I have a church that I get to go to prayer meeting and be with saints that know me and my kids and love me, whether or not there was a second shooter, you know?
Right. And I think I love all of that, and this is why a church community is so important. I know that you have to go to that prayer meeting in just a minute, but just
Yeah.
we could add one more thing. Like, is it really so impossible to believe, especially after Minneapolis, after the Minneapolis church shooting, the Catholic with the kids, the Nashville school shooter, even going all the way back to Columbine, actually, like Dylan Klebold and his partner Eric, something. They were also into transgender stuff. That came out, I think that came out way later. So that
Hmm.
it's not as if transgender, quote unquote, male shooter, male shooters are somehow a thing. It's not as if political violence from the extreme radical left is somehow a new thing. Is it
Yeah.
really hard to believe that a kid pulled off a sloppy job, and that's all there is to it? And I
Hmm.
think that we have plenty of evidence to suggest that's the case. You have means, motive, and opportunity, which is how you establish a crime in any court, right? And so
Hmm.
this looks like what it is. And is that so hard to believe that's exactly what it is? Is that not the direction the country has been going in for the past,
Hmm.
I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, pick it, right? Is that so hard to believe
No.
versus no, there must be some grand, larger conspiracy behind it all? Maybe there is, or maybe this is exactly what it looks like. Maybe this is the end product of a nation that has forgotten God, that has thrown Him out of the public square and has tolerated crazy behavior and beliefs for far too long, going all the way back to the start with the talk given by Pete Hegseth. Is that hard to believe? I don't think that it is. And I think it's, Occam's razor. I think it's the more valid explanation, the more heartbreaking, explanation, the one that's like, oof, this looks at all of us as Americans instead of pointing the finger over there.
Yeah. And I think we as Christians, like, you should really check your heart if you're not looking with grief at the mugshot of that young man, you
Amen.
know? And like, essentially, like, for sure, he's going to have to be responsible for his actions. And if
Amen.
in the court of law, it's determined that this is the guy that dropped the hammer, I believe that there should be capital punishment for this crime, should be
Amen.
held responsible. But
Yep.
that doesn't mean he's the only one that sinned in this process. Like we as a society are giving our kids untested, or we know actually, we're giving them stuff that's literally messing them up forever for their life.
That's right.
And we've created an ideology and a doctrine around it that's dangerous and is hurting kids and is mutilating them and chemically castrating them. And and I grieve for it. This isn't transphobic hate. I want them to be in there. One of the videos that Charlie said, like, I want you to be happy. I want you to be who God put you on this earth to be. And I want you to go forth and live your life for his glory and realize that sacrificing and submitting to his will and following the word, which is the best instruction manual for a joyful, happy life. I want that for you. And I don't feel like I can look at the fruit of, just like I can look at people in my own church that don't have joy in the same, well, maybe a lesser degree. Let's get closer to Jesus here. Figure out what the creator of the universe, how he wove this together to work well and for our good. And let's get there together. And the Christian worldview has a system that can demand justice, but also has the mercy side and God being the ultimate judge here. And the state having a requirement to bear the sword, us being, having spiritual weapons, and sometimes that's physical to defend those that are in our care, and all this complex stuff. We have an answer for all of it, and we need to take that to our local community, our family, us personally in our own heart, and I think it's going to happen. Like what an amazing time to be alive.
I agree, brother. Man, I wish I could keep you here forever so we could keep talking, but I know you got to go put into action all the things you just been talking about. Go and take your family to a Wednesday prayer meeting. So grateful for you. So grateful for your friendship, for your wisdom, for your experience, and your perspective as always. Where would you like to send me? Absolutely. Where would you like to send people to find out more about you and what you do?
Well, I guess I'm most active on X at The Spearing, and have my website link in the bio, but it's spearing.co. And I'm working on some offerings for the church and for men in the community that are leading their community. I'm trying to focus on people that kind of already have the brown belt level at some of these kind of skills and equip them to lead and teach in their own community. That's kind of how we're trying to build our land out to help those. So if you're in a church or a Christian school or someplace and you're leading that and you're saying, I need more tools and I need more training and I need more talking points to help lead it where I am and training, get in touch with me, DM me, or contact us on the website. We're trying to offer kind of in-person training here with kind of the elaborate cadre of people that we even just have in our own church with all these different experiences to enable people in their community to protect those that are under their care, as I think we're going to see more of this because of the cultural state we're in and the sinful state of our nation. And I think Christians need, first and foremost, to be ready to proclaim the gospel. But for anybody that is seeking to physically harm those under our care, we see that prescriptive in Adam working and guarding the garden, and the Levitical priest working and guarding the tabernacle. I take the guard thing very seriously. I feel like that's one of my gifts that God has given me some knowledge and wisdom in that area and actual real technical skill. So I want to help you guys do that and bring that to your community and come up with ways we can do that. So just get in touch with me if that's a angst that you feel where you are and you want help with that. I'm trying to do that.